Hello viewers, welcome to my channel. I'm Hasham. Last video I have explained you about allowances. The allowances are the monetary benefits given by the employer to the employee for a specific purpose, like dearness allowance, house rent allowance, entertainment allowance, children education allowance. All these things I have explained in the last video. So if you have not watched that video, I suggest you to go to the playlist of my channel. Select the subject Income Tax 1 for the assessment year 2021. Watch those videos. Definitely you will get the provisions of computing the income from salary. So now in this video I am going to explain you about perquisites. So normally students will find this topic a little bit difficult because so many provisions are there in perquisite. So I'm going to explain you about the meaning of the term perquisites, classification of perquisites, and particularly rent-free accommodation. First of all, in examination you may get a theory question regarding explain the perquisites, explain the meaning of the term perquisites. So listen carefully, watch the video till the end to get the complete command on the provisions. So perquisite, any benefit given by the employer, any benefit given by the employer to the employee or their family members, either in cash or in kind, are called perquisites. Again I repeat, any benefit given by the employer to the employee or their family members, either in cash or in kind, are called perquisites. So perquisites are taxable. Now what do you mean by family members? Because in the definition I told you, it's the benefit given to employee or their family members. So family members include spouse of the employee, then children of the employee and their spouses, parents, dependents, servants. These are the category of people who comes under the category of family. Friends will not come, even if they are family friends. They will not be considered as a family member for calculating the value of perquisite. Now perquisites are taxable only if it is given by the employer. If the perquisite are given by any other person other than employer, it is not taxable under the income from salary. It will be taxable under income from other sources. Similarly, the perquisite is taxable even if it is not availed. Even if it is not availed by the employee. Example, one of the perquisite is given to the employee, but the employee has not used it, but still it will be included in his income. So these are some of the provisions of perquisite. Now classifying the perquisite. Perquisites are classified into different categories, like perquisites taxable in the hands of all employees. First category are those perquisites which are taxable in the hands of all employees. Second category, perquisites which are taxable only in specified cases. And thirdly, tax-free perquisite. So these are the things I am going to explain you now. In this video, I am going to explain you about those perquisites which are taxable in the hands of all the employees, no exception. For every employee, these perquisites are fully taxable. So what are the perquisites here? Example of those perquisites are rent-free accommodation, RFA. In the problems, very frequently you will come across this perquisite, rent-free accommodation. So give more concentration in remembering the provisions of RFA, rent-free accommodation. Concession in rent of accommodation. Sometimes the employer will give the accommodation not rent-free, but they will charge the rent, but at a concessional rent. The market value of the rent is monthly, suppose 20,000, but the employer has charging only 10,000. This is called concession in the matter of rent. That is also a perquisite taxable in the hands of all employees. Next one, insurance premium paid by the employer on the life of the employee. Sometimes insurance policy is taken by the employee in his own name, but the premium on that policy is paid by the employer. It is a taxable perquisite. Next one, personal monetary obligation of the employee met by the employer. Suppose there are a number of personal monetary obligations which are payable by the employee, but it is paid by the employer. Example, club fees paid, or any other monetary obligation is there which is of the employee, but it is fulfilled by the employer. It's a taxable purpose. Interest-free loan or concession of interest on loan. Sometimes the employer will give loan to the employee free of interest. No interest charges will be made by the employer. Suppose if the employee has taken a loan from bank, he would have to pay interest to bank. But here employer is giving the loan to the employee interest free. That is also a taxable perquisite. Or concession in the matter of interest. Suppose the employee, if he takes the loan from bank, the banker is charging 10%. But the employer is charging only 2%. So it is called concession in the matter of interest. That is also a taxable purpose. Holiday facilities. Sometimes the employer has made a holiday home. That means employees can go and stay in that holiday home. They are getting the benefit. So it's a taxable perquisite. Free meals provided. Medical facilities, gifts, credit card, club membership fee, use of movable assets and transfer of movable assets. These are the few examples of those perquisites which are taxable to all the employees. Now, the first and the most important perquisite is rent-free accommodation. So now I am going to explain you what are the provisions of Income Tax Act regarding the valuation of rent-free accommodation. See, when sometimes the employer will give the accommodation to the employee without charging any rent. Example, Mr. X is the employee. He is working in a company. The company has given him a flat free of rent. That means if he has taken a flat on rent, he would have to pay the rent. But he has not taken the flat on rent. The company has provided him the flat without charging any rent. So it's a benefit. It's a benefit to the employee because he is using the accommodation which belongs to the employer. An employer has given him freely rent-free accommodation. The Income Tax Act has given the provision how to calculate the value of rent-free accommodation. So here accommodation are divided into two categories, unfurnished and furnished. Unfurnished means without any furniture. Furniture includes all basic amenities of a home, like refrigerator is there, television is there, and furniture, dining table, cots, all these things, fans, all these things, air conditioner, all these things will come under furniture. So sometimes an employer will give furnished house, complete furnished, and no need to purchase anything. Already AC is there, refrigerator is there, cots and dining table, every sofa set, everything is there. That is called furnished. Sometimes the employer will give unfurnished accommodation. Furniture will not be provided. Bare house will be given. So two types of problems will come across, unfurnished house and furnished. So first of all, you calculate the value of unfurnished accommodation. By applying the provisions of Income Tax Act, we calculate the value of unfurnished accommodation. After calculating that, you add the value of furniture. How to calculate the value of the furniture? When furnishings are owned by the employer, 10% per annum of the original cost of the asset. Now, if a furnished accommodation is given, so first of all, you need to calculate what is the value of unfurnished house. After calculating value of unfurnished house, you add 10% of the cost of furnishings if the furniture belongs to the employer. If all the furniture belongs to the employer, owned by employer, in that case 10% per annum of the original cost of the furniture will be added. Example, suppose the value of rent-free unfurnished accommodation is 1 lakh. 1 lakh rupees is the value of rent-free unfurnished accommodation. The furniture provided, the cost of the furniture provided is 2 lakh rupees and the furniture is owned by the employer. So 2 lakh rupees is the original cost. 10% of 2 lakh, 20,000. This 20,000 will be added to 1 lakh. So 1 lakh rupees is the value of unfurnished house. 20,000 is the value of furniture used. So total 1,20,000 is the value of rent-free furnished accommodation. Sometimes the accommodation is not owned by the employer. Accommodation is hired by the employer. The employer has taken the accommodation on hire, on rent, and given this accommodation to the employee. In that case, rent paid by the employer or rent payable by the employer will be added. So two things you have to see. If the accommodation is owned by the, if the furniture is owned by the employer, 10% of the original cost of furniture. If the furniture is hired by the employer, hire charges paid by the employer, that will be added to the value of unfurnished house to get to the value of furnished house. That's all. Now, for calculating the value of unfurnished accommodation, all the employees are divided into two categories: government employees and non-government employees. Suppose if the employee is a government employee, the provision is very simple. If the SSC, if the employee is a government employee, then rent fixed by the government is the value of the perquisite. Rent fixed by the government is the value of the rent-free unfurnished accommodation. Well, if the employee is a government employee, no calculations, nothing. We should not take anything. We have to take only rent fixed by the government. That's it. For whom? Government employee. For non-government employee, provisions are there. Different provisions are there. Now you concentrate more. When non-government employees, when accommodation is owned by the employer. For non-government employees, two situations are there. The first situation, accommodation is owned by the employer. Second situation, accommodation is hired by the employer. So these two situations may arise in case of non-government. So non-government, when accommodation is owned by the employer, now value of rent-free accommodation depends on the population of the city in which the accommodation is provided. Depends on the population of the city in which accommodation is provided. If the accommodation is provided in a small city where the population is up to 10 lakhs, not exceeding 10 lakhs, then the value of the perquisite is 7.5% of salary. If the accommodation is owned by the employer, if the accommodation is owned by the employer and provided in a small city, the population less than 10 lakh, 7.5% of salary. If the accommodation is provided in a medium city where the population is more than 10 lakh but less than 25 lakh, up to 25 lakh, exceeding 10 lakh but not exceeding 25 lakh, up to 25 lakh. In that case, it's a medium town. The value of the perquisite is 10% of salary. If the accommodation is provided in a big town where the population is more than 25 lakh people, value of accommodation is 15% of salary. So 7.5%, 10%, 15% of salary, you have to remember. So these provisions will be applied for non-government employees and the accommodation is owned by the employer. Right? Now, second situation, when the accommodation is hired by the employer, it is not necessary that always accommodation will be owned by the employer. Sometimes the employer will take the accommodation on rent, hired, and this accommodation will be given to the employee rent-free. Rent-free. In that case, in all cities the rule is same. Whatever be the size of the city, the least of the following two is the value of the rent-free unfurnished accommodation. Rent paid by the employer or 15% of salary. The least of these two will be the value of the rent-free unfurnished accommodation. If the accommodation is hired by the employer, if the accommodation is hired by the employer and given to the employee, least of the following two. Actual rent paid by the employer or 15% of salary, whichever is least is the value of the rent-free unfurnished accommodation. So again I repeat, two category of employees, government, non-government. For government employees, rent fixed by the government is the value of the unfurnished accommodation, finished. For non-government employee, we have to see whether the accommodation is owned by the employer or hired. If it is owned by the employer, then we have to see the city. If it's a small city, less than 10 lakh, up to 10 lakh, 7.5% of salary. More than 10 lakh, up to 25 lakh, 10% of salary. More than 25 lakh population, 15% of salary. That's all. Now, if the accommodation is hired by the employer, in that case, for all the cities, no exception, for all the cities, least of the following two is the value of the perquisite. First one, rent paid by the employer. Second, 15% of salary. 15% of salary. Now the question is, what do you mean by salary? Because in all these cases, you can see the salary is used. 7.5% of salary, 10%, 15% of salary. Now the question arises, what do you mean by salary? So Income Tax Act has given the meaning of the term salary. Salary includes basic plus bonus plus fees plus commission plus DP. DP stands for dearness pay. Dearness pay. All taxable allowances except DA. DA will be included if it enters for retirement benefit. Plus monetary payment made by the employer other than perquisites. Income tax or profession tax paid or reimbursed by the employer. You have to remember this meaning of the term salary. Normally students will commit the mistake in calculating salary only. So remember this, what are the items that will come under the head salary? Bonus, basic. First of all, basic plus bonus plus fees plus commission plus dearness pay plus all taxable allowances except DA. But DA will be included if it enters for retirement benefit, plus any monetary payment made by the employer other than perquisite. Perquisite should not be taken. Any other monetary payment made by the employer, and income tax or profession tax paid or reimbursed by the employer. That's the meaning of the term salary. That's all. So I've explained you how to calculate the value of unfurnished accommodation and furnished accommodation of government employees and non-government employees. Now, when employer provides accommodation in a hotel, sometimes the employer is not giving accommodation but providing the employee accommodation in a hotel. So for both government and non-government employees, the value of the perquisite is least of the following two: 24% of salary or actual charges paid or payable to hotel. 24% of salary or actual charges paid by the employer to the hotel. Least of these two is the value of the perquisite. So this provision will be applied if the accommodation is given in a hotel, whether government employee or non-government employee. Government or non-government, on hotel. But this perquisite becomes tax-free to all employees on satisfying the three conditions. If accommodation is provided in a hotel, then it may be tax-free. When it may be tax-free? If three conditions are satisfied. If these three conditions are not satisfied, then it is taxable to the least of these two. If the three conditions are satisfied, all the three, not any one. If all the three conditions are satisfied, then the accommodation provided in a hotel is a tax-free perquisite. What are the three conditions? First, accommodation is provided in a hotel for transfer of employee from one place to another place. Sometimes the employer has transferred the employee from one place to another place. In that case, he has been provided an accommodation in a hotel. So, employee was transferred from one place to another place and accommodation is given in a hotel. Then it is a tax-free perquisite. Second condition, such accommodation is provided for less than 15 days. If accommodation in hotel is given only for less than 15 days, it will be tax-free. If it is given for more than 15 days, it will become taxable. Third, such hotel is hired but not owned by the employer. Third condition, the hotel in which accommodation is given should not be owned by the employer. It should be hired by the employer. If these three conditions are satisfied, then accommodation given in the hotel is not taxable. It's a tax-free perquisite. Now, concession in rent of accommodation. I have explained you all the provisions regarding rent-free accommodation. Sometimes accommodation is given not rent-free, but at concessional rent. If the market area of the rent of the accommodation is 20,000 per month, But suppose the employer is charging only 5,000 per month. Because for employer says, you are my employee, I'm charging only 5,000 from you as rent. Whereas if you take the same accommodation from outsider, he will charge you 20,000. That means the employee is getting the accommodation at a concessional rate. That concession is also taxable perquisite. So how to calculate concession in rent of accommodation? The value of the concession is the value of rent-free accommodation minus actual rent paid by the employee. First of all, we treat the accommodation as rent-free accommodation. We assume the accommodation is given as rent-free accommodation and we calculate the value of the accommodation by applying these provisions. After that, we deduct the rent paid by the employee to the employer. During the year, how much rent paid by the employee to the employer, that will be deducted. That you will get the concession in rent. That's a taxable perquisite. So in this video, I have explained you the meaning of the term perquisite and what are the different types of perquisite. I have explained in detail regarding rent-free accommodation and concession in the matter of rent. Because this perquisite is very, very important. Hope you have understood my lecture. If you are satisfied, give a like to the video. Share my channel in your group, in your friend circle, so that more students can watch the video and enhance the knowledge. Give your comments on these videos. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe my channel if you have not yet subscribed. Inshallah, next topic I'll continue in the next video.